What if the future actually isn't burning you out? What if it's actually the fact that your brain is forcing you to live through disaster after disaster every day? You think these disasters are going to happen, or even you just plan for them. I know what you might be thinking. There's a big difference between actually living through something and simply thinking about it, but planning for it. But the deeper part of your brain doesn't understand language, and it doesn't have a concept of time. It only experiences what you put it through. And what you put it through could be what's actually happening, or it could be what you're thinking about. So to that part of your brain, simply thinking about a scenario is the same thing as living through it. So first, why should you listen to me about this? I'm a Stanford-trained medical doctor, and for the past decade plus, I've been obsessed about how the mind works. Specifically, I'm interested in how the mind can be compromised or hacked, either by humans through manipulation or increasingly with tech and AI. And then with that understanding, I want to know how to fortify the mind, to defend it against that. And I call this idea psychosecurity. In this video, I'm going to explain what your superpower is, how it's being used against you, and how you can reclaim your superpower. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to explain why intelligence actually works against you. In other words, the smarter you are, the more trapped you can be. So first off, you have a superpower. You're a wizard, Harry. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, why don't you just talk about it in real terms, right? I worry about things sometimes, or I ruminate. Sometimes the most important and critical things in our lives, we're completely ignorant to until we get a second perspective. So play along with me, and I promise you'll get a second perspective on this. There are different ways that you can use this superpower. If you think about the future that might exist, and then you actively work to bring this reality in contact with your imagined reality, we call that planning. And the V2 level of that we call manifesting in some circles. If you travel to a reality that you have no intention of bringing into contact with this one, and it's pleasant, we call it fantasizing. If you travel to a past reality with the intent to improve your present reality, we call that learning. Now, there are ways that you can use this superpower and things can go terribly wrong. And I'll tell you a few of them, and the last one is a true nightmare. Now, if you travel to a future reality that's unpleasant and you either get stuck there, can't stop thinking about it, or you compulsively travel there, and we call that anxiety. If you travel to an unpleasant reality that's in the past, you either compulsively go there or you get stuck there. We call that depression. And the worst scenario is that if you travel to a different reality and you lose track of which one is real, we call that psychosis. And while psychosis is terrifying, most people don't have it. It's relatively rare. But what most people do suffer from is some version of the anxiety or the depression. So this problem is way worse than just worrying too much. And I'm going to give you 3 concrete examples of how people lose control of the superpower. So first concrete example comes from my days in being a personal trainer. So I'd physically be working with people in fitness and creating diets for them. And I remember taking people to gym sometimes, and we'd be doing an exercise, and before we started, I'd usually push the person to have a goal in mind of how many reps they're going to do. And they pick a number, let's say 10. They'd be doing the exercise, doing the workout, and I'd notice that, of course, they'd be exerting themselves and trying to get to that number. And what I'd notice is sometimes people would get to 4, 5, 6, it's getting difficult, and then they'd stop. And they'd tell themselves, and they'd tell me, that's all I can do. But I could tell just by looking at them that, yeah, it looked difficult, but they could definitely give more. They weren't giving everything. Sometimes they'd even be talking to me while they were failing. I'm like, if you have the energy to be talking to me or thinking other thoughts, that's energy you could have been spent doing that thing. And it's only when people would have the grimacy face and they're not thinking about what other people are thinking about them. Maybe they're even making some grunty noises. That's when you learn that somebody's really giving everything that they have. So anyway, I would notice that these people weren't getting there, and I was getting frustrated trying to convince them and say, you know that you're not giving all of your energy to this thing. And I tried to figure out what was going on. And it dawned on me that these people were thinking too much about the future. What they were saying to themselves was, can I do 4 more reps, 5 more reps? They were holding the burden of those 5 reps instead of focusing on the burden of this rep. This repetition. Holding all of those 5 in their minds was too much for them to bear. And so then they sacrificed on the only one that they had to do. And I realized that the more that people do that, the more that you hold this big thing in your head of how much you need to do, the less likely you are to actually do what you need to do right now. So that's one concrete example. The second is enjoying things. You can't actually enjoy things if you can't come back to the present. When was the last time you accomplished something and immediately, even before you can enjoy it, you're already thinking about the next thing? I went to school for a very long time. I went to medical school. I remember this happening all the time where I'd be studying for a test, and as soon as it was done, maybe even I found out that I passed, so I had every reason to be happy. But instead I was like, I had a brief moment of good satisfaction, and then I was already thinking about what's the plan for the next thing? What am I going to study for? And I just didn't have any reprieve from that. And it wasn't because I was choosing not to be in the present moment, even though that's what I was telling myself, and that's what most people tell themselves. But the actual reason, the truth, is that I couldn't. I was so accustomed to thinking about the future, to planning for it. And the reality, being concrete again, going back to school, is that we all learned this when we were young kids, even before school. This goes back to even the kid that your parents will tell you. Usually it's in the form of, if you do X, you will get Y. Or if you don't do X, you'll get a cookie, you'll get dessert, you'll get an extra time before you go to bed. You can watch the movie, finish the movie. So we're trained to do that. So the kid who's able to time travel and go, I can stay up 15 more minutes to watch this movie. If I can hold that in my mind, then that will enable me to make the choice to whatever it is, clean my room or eat my veggies or whatever, that will allow me to get that future. And that's great. That really is a superpower. To be able to do that, not a lot of organisms that I know are able to do that. Doesn't mean that no organisms are, but most of them can't, not to the degree that we can. So we're trained to do this, and in school as well. If you study, you'll get good grades. If you do this, and that's delayed gratification. Again, superpower, nothing wrong with it. It powers most of the things, most of the progress that we see. It's only when we get caught doing that and we can't come back. Because I don't know about you, but I wasn't really taught to come back. Not until I was much later, and only because I would seek it out. And then I would find things like meditation, being in the present moment, being calm, focusing on your breath, and these practices that I'm scraping around on the internet, and no one ever told me about it, but I realized this is what I've been missing. And it's a natural state, I think, as a child. You see these children that are purely in the moment. The next time you walk by a playground, just notice how kids are and how not preoccupied they are with what other people are thinking about them, and how much you can even get into fantasy moments with kids where they're fulfilling some kind of role, or they're on an adventure, or they're even an animal, and they get so into it. And it's so fun to watch, because you know that on some level that they're actually experiencing that, because it's so real for them, because they're right there and they've been able to let go of these notions of other people looking and what so-and-so going to say. Keyword there being going to. So it's in the future, it's worrying about the future. So coming back to present, the beauty of our life unfolds if we're able to do that. And the last concrete thing that I want to talk about with this is the potential that no one realizes in their lives. No, that's a bad way to phrase it. The great projects that never get started because people are thinking too much about the future. And I'll give you a personal example from my life. In fact, even starting YouTube, I've fallen prey to this so many times. And what ends up happening is, as a thinker, I like to strategize. I like to plan things out. I like to account for all the details. I like to build. I like to prepare. And that's great at a certain period of time. But beyond a certain level of exploration, you actually need to do the steps. You need to do the thing. You need to shoot the video, even if it's messy, and just throw it out there and do your best. You actually need to start moving. And if you're like me and you've used that planning and the strategizing muscle in your mind enough, then that gets comfortable and it's fun because you're good at it and that's what you know how to do. But making mistakes and failing and putting something out there that you know is terrible and that other people might call garbage, that's a scary thing to do. So the more, maybe intelligence, not the right word, but the more that you're accustomed to planning, the more that you can be susceptible to misusing this superpower, because you're so prone to avoiding the bad things in the future and you're trying to get to that good thing. But the thing is, the only way that this really works, where you strategize everything out and take that sniper shot where you get your goal the first time, that only works on things that are a short distance away from you. It's like making something for dinner or making the best dessert. You can get all your ingredients, you can go to the store, you can make sure that all those ingredients are exactly what they need to be, you can measure everything out, and you can nail it. If you've got a good recipe and you're precise about it, you can nail it. But the bigger things in life, beyond a meal, that you're gonna fail. And the reason is that it requires a level of learning that you just can't get from talking or listening or consuming videos about YouTube or about the project. You actually need to do. I went to Russia when I was a kid, when I was 19 years old. I was a Mormon missionary and I went to Russia. And I remember for weeks before I actually made the flight, I would learn Russian in a classroom setting. And I was like, I'm gonna figure out this language. I've got 3 months, I'm gonna figure it out, learn all of the grammar, all the words. I'm not gonna be perfect at it, but I'm gonna plug my brain into it and I'm gonna really understand it. And I did, and I got to a certain level of understanding, but it wasn't until I actually flew there. And I was on my first day, making every single mistake, and it's like Russian completely flew out of my mind. And I'm sitting there in front of people trying to talk to them, just couldn't get a word out. That's when I started to learn. That's when I started to actually get the golden data back. And that's when my learning went from steady increase to taking off. And that's true in working out too. There was only so much that I could learn about fitness and working out before actually doing it, and making the mistakes showed me much more than I would have been able to learn just from a book or from a YouTube video. And so what ends up happening, and this is like the curse of intelligence, and this is why sometimes you look at people who are making it in your area. In my case, it's YouTube right now. And sometimes you get the hubris to kind of scratch your head and go like, how did this person become famous? Like here I am like learning all about YouTube hooks and titles and thumbnails, and there's so much to learn. There's a world to understand here. And yet that person doesn't seem like they're overflowing with intelligence and they've got all this figured out. And like, I can't imagine this person has done the deep dive that I've done. And I'm missing the picture, obviously. I'm putting too much into the knowledge part of it and not enough into the doing part. And it's in the doing that you actually get the progress. You know, a phrase that I really like that I didn't come up with, but it's hard to multiply zero. So even if you put yourself out there and you get 50 videos out and they're mostly crap, it's 50 and you're learning, but then there's something for people to look at and there's some kind of traction that you can make. Whereas you can learn for 100 years and you can be the expert of YouTube on paper, but if you never throw a video out there, if you never talk to your boss, if you never ask the girl out, if you never risk making a mistake, then you'll never learn and you'll never get there. And I think that's probably the biggest tragedy of this dangerous time travel is missed potential. It's missed opportunity. Your life potential, your energy it's wasting away because you're not able to come back to present and, like a kid, making the first step and not thinking too much about it. Time and a place. There's a time to be thinking about the future and use your superpower, and there's time to bring it back, turn off your IQ, bring it back down, and just do the darn thing and recognize that it's going to be dumb and you're going to fail and it's going to be stupid, but you're going to learn. And I've realized now, and I'm realizing again with YouTube, this is the way to do it. You got to turn off the brain for the first half of the day. When it's a YouTube day, I'm just doing the thing. I'm just throwing the video out there and we're going to see what happens and I'm going to learn. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm committed to throwing these videos out and getting better every time. If you did find this helpful, this is something I think about all the time. I think about the mind mechanics and how to improve it, and I'm building a product right now using AI, background in AI as well, by the way. So I'm putting a product together, and if you want to see more of this, subscribe. Everyone says it, but would help.